These are the text notes for Alice Walker's everyday use. So, what we have here is a first person point of view of a mother who lives with her shy and fire scarred daughter, Maggie. And they are waiting in the yard for Maggie's sister Dee to visit. And really, like this first part of the setup here, we get the idea that um, they're trying to get it nice and clean, and then they want to make a good impression. She's talking about cleaning the yard, and that her sister is nervous and anxious for her sister to visit, and she is, anxious about that trip. And Maggie is different. She's different. Her life experiences have altered her, and we learn later that that was a fire when she was a kid. And she's very badly burned and she's scarred, and she's homely. She's ashamed of herself. She's not as intelligent as her sister is. And so I think that's always been the difference. She thinks, Maggie does, that her sister has always held life in the palm of one hand, and that no is a word the world never learned to say to her. um, she thinks kind of maybe life has always kind of come easy to Dee. So um, the mom in the third paragraph here, she is envisioning a scenario like on television where a child who's made it in the world is coming confronted by her father and mother, and she's so excited to see them, and she gives them a big hug, and she thanks them for all their sacrifices, and I wouldn't be where I am if you haven't done what you did for me, and they would cry and whatever. And so she says, but her life is not like that, that this is not like that. In real life, our mother is really a force to kind of be reckoned with. She is a large, big bone woman with rough man working hands. In the winter, she wears flannel to bed, overalls during the day. She can kill and clean a hog as mercilessly as a man. Our fat keeps her hot in zero weather. She can work outside all day, breaking ice to get water for washing. Can eat pork liver cooked over the open fire minutes after it comes off steaming from the hog. One winter, I knocked a bull calf straight in the brain between the eyes with a sledgehammer and had the meat hung up to chill before nightfall. But of course, all of this does not show on television. So her mother is very. She's a man. She's a man. Can outwork just about any man you put her up against. She's tough, and she's had to live that way, raising two kids um, and everything. There's a contrast there. But Dee is different. Dee um, is different than that. So, Maggie is really concerned about, and we'll talk about Dee in just a second. But Maggie's really concerned that when Dee comes home, that she knows she wants to make the best appearance. She's concerned about the way she looks here, and then this is Maggie. We'll talk about Maggie, and then we'll talk about Dee. She says, "How do I look, Mama? Have you ever seen a lame animal, perhaps a dog, run over by some careless person rich enough to own a car, sidle up to someone who is ignorant enough to be kind to them? That is the way my Maggie walks. She has been like this, chin on chest, eyes on ground, feet in shuffle, ever since the fire that burned the other house to the ground. Dee is lighter than Maggie, with nicer hair and a fuller figure. She's a woman now, though sometimes I forget. Um, she is different. She's pretty. She would always look people in the eye. She always wanted nice things. So we have Dee wanted nice things. She was determined not to stare down any disaster in her efforts. Her eyelids would not flicker for a minute at a time. At 16, she had a style of her own and knew what style was. Um, they raised the money up to send Dee to school. The church and Maggie's, they sent her away to Augusta to school. And so she's learned, she's learned, I guess I should say, to make that distinction. She reads to us without pity, forcing words, lies, and other folks' habits, whole lives upon us too, sitting trapped and ignorant underneath her voice. She washed us in a river of make believe, burned us with a lot of knowledge we didn't necessarily need to know, pressed us to her the serious way she read to shove us away at just a moment like dimwits we seemed about to understand. So, Mother's uneducated. Maggie is uneducated. Mother's school closed down after second grade. She doesn't know why. She never did ask because in 1927, colored asked fewer questions than they do now. And Maggie is our damaged goods, right? She's scarred and simple, but she's sweet and shy and good natured. But she knows that she's not bright. It says, like good looks and money, quickness passed her by. She will marry John Thomas, who has mossy teeth and an earnest face, and then I'll be free to sit here and I guess just sing church songs to myself. Although I was never a good singer. Um, Dee's a bit uppity. We get the impression of that when they arrive at the house. So, let's go there. She says, Maggie, let's see, I'm sorry. Um, it is hard to see them clearly through the strong sun, but even the first glimpse of leg out of the window I'm sorry, out of the car tells me it's Dee. Her feet were always neat looking, as if God himself had shaped them with a certain style. From the other side of the car comes a short, stocky man, hairs all over his head, a foot long and hanging from his chin like a kinky mule tail. I hear Maggie sucking her breath. That's what it sounds like when you see the wriggling end of a snake just in front of your foot on the road. D next, addressed down to the ground in this hot weather, addressed so loud it hurts my eyes. There are yellows and oranges, enough to throw back the light of the sun. The dress is loose and it flows, and as she walks closer, I like it. Um, I hear Maggie go, again. It is her sister's hair. It stands up straight up like the wool on a sheep. It is as black as night, and around the edges are two long pigtails that rope about it like small lizards disappearing behind her ears. Wazuzu Tino, she says, coming on in that gliding way the dress makes her move. The short, stocky fellow with the hair to his navel is all grinning, and he follows up with a Assalamu alaikum, my mother and sister. So what you have there are the Ugandan phrase, Wazuso Tino, which is good morning, and then the man that she is with says Assalamu alaikum, which is a Muslim phrase which means peace be with you. Um, and so Dee is like, y'all don't get up. She goes back to the car. She gets a Polaroid camera and starts taking pictures of the house, and of Maggie and of her mother sitting there. So we kind of get the impression that she is a bit embarrassed by her mother. She's in the house that they choose to live in. That's somewhere in this section. I thought that was interesting. Like as her mother had any choice in the matter. She won't ever bring her friends to visit them there at the house. I think that is up a little bit. Oh yeah, here it is, up in on page 915. She says, no doubt when Dee sees it, she will want to tear it down. She wrote me once that no matter where we choose to live, she will manage to come and see us, but she will never bring her friends. So she's embarrassed about their heritage and where they live and everything. So anyway, long story short, she has decided that she is no longer D anymore, that her new name is Wangaro Liwanika Kamanjo, Wangaro Liwanika Kamanjo. And her mom's like, well, what happened to D? And she said, she's dead. Wangaro said, I couldn't bear it any longer being named after the people who oppressed me. So that's her new name. She wants to be called that, as she's kind of killed off the old D in an attempt to remove herself from the people who oppress her, which kind of hurts mom's feelings because she's like, I named you after your Aunt Dicey. Uh, and then Garrow tries to argue back and forth. We'll just call her D because that's, who she is. She tries to, um, explain this to D, but D's really kind of fixed her mind. They argue back and forth, and she says, um, you know, that this is her, the new her. This is what she wants to be called. She's cutting herself off from the people who oppress her, and she means the white folk. So, um, Mother agrees to call her whatever, and even attempts to call her that, asks her how to pronounce it, and then she tries it a couple more times before she can finally get it out of the way, is what she says. And then she tries over, she calls him Assalamu alaikum at first, and then he wants to be called Hakima Barber. So, anyway, so they sit down to dinner. They talk about this new lifestyle that she's living in. They eat. Salam Aleikum doesn't want to eat. He doesn't eat collards and pork because it's unclean. I'm assuming that's a Muslim custom. But Dee tears them up. She loves the collards and chitlins and cornbread and greens and everything else, and everything is delighted. It delights her. Everything's kind of an antiquity to her. Um, so Dee's real offense here is her arrogance and condescension toward her family, not this new attempted embrace of her African culture. Mom's trying to be really open-minded, right? But Dee doesn't really want her mother's acceptance, nor is she willing to accept or respect her mother's cultural traditions. And we can see that when Dee starts looking at the family heirlooms, what she wants to claim and take home to decorate her house. So those were like the top and the dasher of a butter churn and some quilts. And so Dee doesn't want to use them. She wants to treat them like antiques or artworks or like kind of evidence of her old heritage or whatever. So Dee, Maggie, who uses the butter churn to make butter and actually uses the quilts, you know, they're her for everyday use, and it's in their everyday use is what makes them so special. So, she tries to lay claim to these quilts, and thinks that she's going to have it. She says, "Can I have these old quilts?" Um, and her mother says she wants the ones that are stitched by hand and not the ones that are stitched by machine. And she says that's not the point. These are all pieces of dresses Grandma used to wear. She did this all by stitching by hand. Imagine. She held the quilts securely in her arms, stroking them. And then they start talking about like some of the pieces came from her old clothes. And then she says she promised. Mom says, "Hey, I promised to give these quilts to Maggie for when she marries John Thomas." And Maggie is like, and Dee's like, "Oh my gosh, like Maggie can't appreciate these quilts. She'd probably be backward enough to put them to everyday use." Um, for D, heritage is a curiosity, something to be put on display for others to observe. She plans to use the turntop, the dasher, as decorative items, and she plans to hang the quilts on the wall. Um, like, is that the only thing that you can do with quilts, right? Is hang them on the wall. And Maggie, it hurts Maggie's feelings because Maggie appreciates these items. And Maggie knows all of their history and she uses them. And Maggie says, "You know what, Mama, she can have them." But the mother takes the quilts away from Dee and gives them back to Maggie. She says, when I looked at her like that, she's looking at Maggie. Well, let me just read that. I looked at her hard. She had filled her bottom lip with checkerberry snuff and had given her face a kind of dopey hangdog look. It was Grandma. The timer's about to run out. Let me stop this and I'll pick back up for just the end of this one.